Hello and welcome to a new episode of Good Morning L&D, and that's a special one, I have to say, because I'm feeling super nervous. Just to yeah tell it straight away, because our guest today, for me, is a true pioneer when it comes to the field of leadership, talent, and culture. The person, our guest today, is the former VP Global Learning and Future of Work at Unilever. And today he is the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Talent, Culture, and Leadership at Heineken. So yeah, welcome with me, Paddy Hull. Welcome, Paddy.
Hey, Moritz. Thanks very much for having me here. I'm delighted to be here, by the way. Also feeling nervous to be on this very cool podcast. So thanks for inviting me.
Wow, now I'm feeling even more nervous. No, I mean, Paddy, we always love to you start where the business is when we talk about all those HR topics of leadership, culture, learning. Unilever is a huge company, 85,000 people, multinational company in the brewing business. I think it's the second biggest player in the field, and maybe we start at this square zero, which is kind of where's the company, where's Heineken right now, what's the strategy, what are the challenges, and you can fill us a little bit into your world before we then, of course, dive into how leadership, learning, culture, and all of that can make a difference.
Super. Hey, great question, Moritz. Heineken, I think, like a lot of companies at the moment, is going through a period of unprecedented change.
Yeah.
I think probably many of your listeners will have heard about Gen Zers not consuming as much alcohol as in the past, not socializing as much in the past. In fact, there's a bit of a loneliness epidemic going on in the world at the moment, which I'll maybe talk about a bit later, which we think has some
Absolutely.
serious repercussions. But yeah, we're facing a very different moment in the industry where we're seeing volume declines in key sectors, and needing to adapt to a new world and a new environment and new ways of working and doing things. We have what we call an evergreen strategy, which is all about trying to make sure that we are evergreen, that we're still going to be very relevant today and into the future. And that evergreen strategy looks at three main levers. Growth, obviously, is the first one. So how do we continue growing in a different world than we've experienced in the past? How do we become more productive so that we can fuel that growth agenda? So we're all about driving cost savings and efficiencies, but in order to drive growth, not to just bank it as savings. We want to make sure that it translates into better pricing for consumers, better advertising, better engagement, that kind of thing. And then the third is, how do we make sure that we're future fit? How do we make sure that we're building a Heineken that is going to continue on into the future? And so as part of that strategy on growth, a few things that we're looking at is obviously how do we still continue growing our core, which is beer, but also how do we look beyond beer? So Heineken Zero, ciders, also different flavors, different platforms, that kind of thing. So how do we look beyond beer into a whole new category, soft drinks, all that kind of thing. On the productivity side, we're also looking very much at how we're leveraging our scale and skill. Heineken in the past has been a very federated organization. So lots of power into the local operating companies and a very lean global system. Now we're looking increasing at how do we take more things out of the opco, leverage them through shared service centers, a digital backbone, this kind of thing. So again, a fundamental shift in power relationships, how the business operates, that kind of thing. And then on future fit, a lot of it continues to be about sustainability. How do we're quite a water intensive company. How are we using less water? How are we using less CO2? How are we making our production that much more better for the environment, the communities in which we operate, that kind of thing.
Just to go straight into it, how can a learning culture make a difference in that moment for Heineken?
Well, let me surprise you a little bit first, Moritz, by saying I don't really believe in the concept of a learning culture, which I know probably sounds like a terrible thing for a learning professional to say, because lots of learning professionals talk about this learning culture. But let me clarify what I mean.
Our mission with Good Morning L&D is to get you first-hand insights from the global thought leaders in learning and development. Just in the recent months, we have been recording sessions with more international guests. And honestly, it was super inspirational and super exciting. And this is why I'm extremely proud to announce today that we, as Good Morning L&D and Forever Day One, are the official media partner of Unleash. So we will be producing podcast sessions from Unleash. We will talk to speakers like Amy Edmondson or Josh Burson to present you their latest thoughts and insights. And if you want to be part of that, you can book your ticket. And with the code Good Morning LD -15, you even get a discount of 15%. So hopefully we're going to meet each other in Paris. If you're already planning to go there, send me a message. I'm happy to meet you for a coffee or whatever. In that sense, see you in Paris. On se voit à Paris.
I think people like you and I are intelligent, and we make decisions based on what the environment around us tells us is the right thing to do, to be safe and to get ahead. So when I think about learning, often as learning professionals, we go, yeah, we need people to learn. We need to make sure that they're doing learning and all this kind of thing. And I disagree about that. I think, are we creating an environment where people feel that learning is safe to do and it's going to help me get ahead? If we create an environment that does those two things, learning will happen, And in my experience, and I've seen this happen time and again, that when people see that learning's safe to do and it'll help me get promoted or rewarded more and all of that, they're more than happy to dedicate time to learning. There was a fantastic experience I had in South Africa. Well, it wasn't fantastic at the time, but part of my career was not in HR. It was actually in sales and marketing. And we had an audit of our marketing processes and how we were engaging with our suppliers. And the audit came back showing we were red across a number of categories. We were not doing a good job at this. And the leader of our team sat down with us and said, guys, this is not okay. This is not good enough. We need to develop our capability in these processes. We need to come out of this. The next time this guy comes to audit us, we need to be green everywhere. We learned those processes. We made sure we knew how to smash those things and get it done properly, because we got a very clear instruction that it's not safe around here if you don't know these things. And if you want to get ahead, you better know them. So I think a lot of it comes down to, not like trying to find time for people to learn and all this kind of thing. It really comes down to making sure, are we creating an environment where leaders are really showing people this is an important thing to do and it's going to help you get rewarded and promoted. Promotion is another key thing. People want to get ahead in their careers. So often we have these personal development plans that sit in the learning function and are detached from the talent management process that's all about helping you get ahead and get promoted in the organization. Just bring those two things together. Make sure that the PDP, or whatever you want to call it, that development plan, is discussed in the talent meeting, and that people can see the link that, oh, you put this in your development plan and you developed it and therefore you got this job. Then people will be like, wow, this learning thing works. It gives me a promotion. I better make time for learning. So that's why I disagree with the whole kind of learning culture thing. Sorry, I've spent a long time talking about that. But how does learning support the strategy? Let me come back to that in a couple of key points. One is also, when I was in marketing, there was this famous saying that the sales guys used to use on us. They said, half the marketing budget is wasted. We just don't know which half. We hated that in marketing because it was very true. But I worry that the same thing can be said about learning. Half the learning budget is wasted. We just don't know which half. And why don't we know which half? Because we have very rudimentary ways to measure learning effectiveness at the moment. We have the happy sheets. Did you enjoy the tea and coffee? And was the facilitator nice? And everyone gives you a 5, and yay, off we go. We're very happy about that. But we struggle to get pre and post survey feedback, so therefore we don't do it. And so we have all this hassle with trying to make sure our learning is really working. But one of my missions has been to make sure that we know the effectiveness of our learning budget and how we are deploying it to support the strategy. So we've been working very closely with our business leads actually on the right kind of survey mechanisms, the right kind of ROI measures on things like our first-time line manager programs and this kind of thing, which we call LEAD, so that we can be very clear about this is the impact that the learning had on your part of the business, on your function, on your team, so that then we are tying the learning very clearly into outcomes. And the leaders really appreciate that as well, because I'm then also able to protect our learning budget and not get it cancelled off when there's budget cuts, because I can say, if you do this, you're not going to get this result. So what do you want
Wow.
here?
I really love this. And I think that's maybe also a fun fact that if I understood this correctly, you started your career as a factory accountant, right?
Yes,
In
I
South
did.
Africa, right?
Yeah. I
So
love a bit of data and analytics still and
yeah,
return on
but
investment.
it's so helpful. I mean, and just because we now already in this, return on invest discussion, maybe you spoke about LEAD, this upcoming line manager program. Maybe just take this example. What are the KPIs that you then basically, show to the business to say, hey, this is the impact we create and this is why we need it, and cannot, just, save costs here.
Yeah. So to answer that question, there's a model that I always use when it comes to measuring programs and designing. Actually, it works for both. It's called COM-B. And it's one of the best behavior change models I've come across. I think it's one of the most researched and statistically validated models. But what it stands for, so the COM is COM. The C stands for capability. The O stands for opportunity. And the M stands for motivation. And basically, COM-B stands for if you have capability, opportunity, and motivation, you will change your behavior. So that equals the B, which is behavior change. So when we are designing the program like LEAD, what I look at is what is the capability that people need and how we're designing that into the program. What is the opportunity they need to be able to practice this and deliver it? Because actually, this is often forgotten about, that you need peers, you need resources, you need tools to carry on being able to deliver what you've learned on the program. And then lastly, you need the motivation to change and do it. So we need to be designing our programs to make sure all of them are, how do we know that someone has developed the capability from the program? How do we know they've got the opportunity to practice it and implement it? And how do we know that they've got the motivation? So we measure everything pre and post on those three things. We ask them beforehand, what's your capability in recruitment? What's your capability in performance management, talent management, all the different things that we want them to learn as a first-time line manager. But then we also ask them, what's your opportunity? So what resources do you have available to you now? What tools do you have? What do you refer to? How does it feel in the environment to do this kind of stuff? Because that's the other thing with opportunity. That's that safety piece. If your leaders and all that don't care about you becoming a good line manager, then the opportunity is actually reduced. And then lastly, what's your motivation to be a good line manager? Do you feel motivated to do it? So we ask that pre, and then we ask that post the session as well, so that we can then measure, has the capability improved, has the opportunity improved, and the motivation. Opportunity, by the way, comes a lot from also peer pressure. So do people around me act like good line managers? So we create a little bit of that opportunity through the program as well. It also comes from making sure that the leaders are engaged in it and they're asking, how was the program? What did you learn? Let me check up. Are you implementing these things? So we also have a big measure on, are the leaders doing that piece of the equation as well? But then we find when we look across these three things, and if we see the shifts that people have made, let's just say their capability moves from, a 3.5 to a 4 out of 5. Then we can say, okay, so their capability in recruitment has gone up by this amount. If we translate that into sort of hours that we can save or hours that are improved because they're doing better recruitment, then we can get an hour number, then we can translate that into an hourly rate that that person is charging to the business, and then we can say that's an ROI. So we go through quite a sophisticated equation to then show the ROI at the end as well. But one of the key things, not only in the measurement but in the design, I find is often with like a lead or a leadership type program, it over indexes on the motivation. We get people very motivated to be great leaders. They come out of there all inspired, but we under index on the opportunity and the capability. And so I'm always challenging my teams around those things to say, are we making sure people have got real resources and tools to deliver this after the program? And are we really sure that they've built their capability on this piece as well? So yeah, that's a little bit how we get into the measurement. I'm kind of ruthless on making sure we're using Combi to design and measure the programs. And maybe if you'll allow me, sorry, and I'm rattling on a bit, but a little anecdote on the measurement side, because I know this pre and post survey thing is often an issue for people. You can probably get people to do the pre-survey, but often the post survey is quite hard to get a response on. So we thought, let's measure different ways in which we do the post survey. So we sent out 3 different emails to leaders after the lead program. On the one email, we said, hey, the deadline's approaching. You need to give us your post-survey feedback. On another email, we said, hey, you're one of the last people to fill in the survey. Best you do the survey. And on the third email, we said, hey, this is a leadership expectation of you to do this. You better do the survey. Which email do you think got the best response? By the way, there are 3 different principles of persuasion. One is, time pressure, one is peer pressure, and the other is leadership top-down pressure. Which one do you think worked the best?
I mean, I would say the peer pressure.
So interestingly, I also thought it would be that. It was the deadline. Funny enough,
Really?
deadline pressure worked the best.
Wow.
Yeah. So just coming back to measurement, we should be testing also different measures all the time. Don't just rely on what I say, Combi kind of thing. I would say every learning professional needs to be working on ways of measuring effectiveness of different options to make sure that we're getting the results that we need. So just a little anecdote. Principles of persuasion.
I love that. And I love the concreteness of that. It's super helpful, I feel. And just because that was something we were touching also on one of our conversations before, I was waiting for the surprise. Because that's something you also believe in, that learning, comes also from surprise, those maybe aha moments. So how does that, fit into the picture you just draw?
Correct. Okay, lovely. Thanks for bringing that back, Moritz. Yeah, there's, I guess there's 3 golden rules that I also bring into our learning when we're thinking about it. So besides Combi, then it's into like, how are you actually delivering the learning? So the 3 principles are, 1, people learn from surprise. Actually, when you look at the neuroscience, learning occurs when actual outcomes differ from predicted outcomes. So our brain might think it's going to go this way, and if we're surprised and see, it's something else, then our brain remembers that. Yeah, so that sticks, exactly.
Yeah.
We also learn from challenge, which is similar to the surprise element, but it's also when something is challenging, requires us to really get involved and work hard at it. That's when we learn. When it's easy, when we're just sitting back listening to a lecture, almost nothing goes in, unfortunately. And that's the 3rd golden rule, that people don't learn from lectures. So please don't put lectures out there to people, because this is the other thing. If we listen to a PowerPoint presentation, a certain part of the brain gets activated. I think it's called Broca's area or something like that. But that's all that happens. Nothing else happens. It doesn't go anywhere else in the brain. Nothing else gets stimulated, unfortunately. So I always challenge my teams to think about, when you're designing the learning, think about resources and experiences. So most of learning can be done through resources. This is when people want to learn something. So I need to know something, I Google it quickly. If there's a YouTube video on it, I'll watch that. But I'm also happy just to get a Google summary of do these 5 steps. That's because I want to learn it. Yeah. So then just do resources. When you're recruiting once a year and you've forgotten how to recruit, all you need is a checklist that reminds you of ask these questions. This is how you do a structured interview process, blah, blah, blah. I don't need to go to a 2-day workshop on recruiting and have some inspiring facilitator tell me what to do. No, just give me a checklist. So most of the time we can sort out learning through good resources, checklists. And in fact, this is where I think AI is going to play a huge role, learning in the flow of work. Great prompts, great agents are like a godsend when it comes to learning. So they are gonna, but that's where you don't really need the surprise element because you want to learn already.
Yeah.
The surprise element comes in where there's stuff that we know people need to learn, but they don't really know they need to learn it. That's when we need to surprise them, because that's when they think they know the answer, but they don't really. And that's when you want to create a great experience. So that's the resources versus experiences. Experiences need to happen with kind of skilled facilitators. They need to happen with people connecting together and getting surprised and challenged to do things in new ways. And that's mainly where you get the leadership development stuff or complex things like negotiation skills, that sort of stuff. You really want to do that in more of a structured, experiential learning environment where you're going to get the surprise and the challenge and not the lecture, not the PowerPoint, though. Because if you think you're going to deliver that through a PowerPoint, that's when it doesn't work.
How do you create this courage also in your team to experiment here and to go new paths? Because I think we're so much, born, I would even say, into this, lecturing type of learning. And
Yeah.
and now I fully agree with AI. I think we have to become even, stronger in differentiating between what you said as resources and experiences. And and how do you give your team the courage and then also, the trust, that
Hmm.
management will play along, right? And that they will
Yeah.
go into the experience with them.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in the idea that constraints are beautiful because they inspire creativity. In fact, there's a lovely book written called The Beautiful Constraint. I forget who's written it, but anyway, your listeners should have a read of it. But so I always give them that constraint. You can't do a lecture, can't do a PowerPoint and all that. So therefore, let's get creative. What else can you do? And actually, I find when we explain to subject matter experts, the people who want to just deliver a lecture about their area, when we explain to them that people, how they learn through surprise and challenge and all that kind of thing, and that let's use this as a constraint that they're not allowed to do a lecture. So let's figure out other ways of doing it. I've actually found SMEs love that because they love that whole creative brainstorming process. And then they'll come up with super ideas like, oh, let's ask them these questions, multiple choice, blah, blah, blah on this topic. And then they get the wrong answer. And then I can go, no, it's this. Again, there's the surprise. And then I can say da, 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 and this. And then we get them to do a case study exercise and blah, blah. They become much more animated. It's much more fun, actually, than just giving a boring lecture about your area. So I must admit, all I do is equip my teams to say, guys, go after surprise, challenge, no PowerPoint. Let's use the constraint to create, new ideas around this kind of thing. And then increasingly, we're using that with the AI as well. So when we're asking it to create, because now a lot of the stuff, as you know, is created online learning journeys, and we build that into the prompts that we're using. We say, hey, bring surprise, bring challenge. You need to have Q&As, you need to have case studies, you need to make it difficult to do, not easy, because that's the one thing where AI is still struggling a little bit, is saying no and pushing you and getting stuff to be harder. But that's where
Yeah.
we use it.
And I feel like they are doing it, right? Because I just read when I was preparing about the IMAC program, which is one for your senior managers, and it ticked all the boxes, I would say, that you were just referring to. And something I really loved about it was it feels like it's really solving a real problem, for the business leaders attending and for Heineken as well. So yeah, maybe you can just give us a little, intro to that one, because I think it's really making the point very clear.
Yes, so HMAC has been running for a few years. It's our signature leadership development program for our our high potential leaders across the organization. We do it in collaboration with IMD. So our leaders go for 2 sessions at IMD over the course of a year. So they have 2 face-to-face sessions, and in between that, they work on a business challenge in small groups. And by the clue in the name business challenge, we make sure it's a good challenge that they work on to get them focused on that. But yeah, what we really try and do in a HMAC is 2 things. We bring them much closer to the overall organization strategy by bringing our exec team members there as well to explain what's going on in their different areas. But then we always pair that with an IMD professor who's going to bring a bit of the surprise and the challenge to them. So we work a lot with Howard Yu, who's really helped them think about how do we get to the next S curve. And he has this lovely way of explaining it where he says, the next S curve doesn't happen by doing, what you've always been doing. You actually need to experiment and find the way to the next S curve. That's how it works. So if you don't have a whole bunch of experiments and pilots running in the organization to think about, for example, how do you get to beyond beer? You're never going to get to beyond beer because there's no playbook for beyond beer yet. You have to figure it out. So yeah, that combination of the professor and the strategy really helps bring that surprise and challenge. And then, we get them to work on these actual challenges. So they have to come back with ideas on beyond beer and how we should do innovation differently, talent marketplaces, that kind of thing. But the other big thing with HMAC that I also want to emphasize is learning is very much I think also a community sport, or it's a team sport. So when you do bring people together, it's also about building that network, building those relationships, building those connections. So often we hear stories. In fact, there was one recently because we have all these WhatsApp groups from the different HMAC cohorts. And so recently someone was just saying, thank you to one of the other HMAC team members for helping speed up, the artwork designs and all that on our new Jamaica World Cup beer bottles kind of thing. And they showed, the new pack design that came through. So that ability to make those connections across the organization really also helps speed up, our effectiveness as an organization. So it also has a huge role to play in that.
Yeah, I really loved also to read about this idea, how do we bring vulnerability in the room? And if that's correct, I mean, you really let them dress up as film stars. That's super cool. And then also that, you basically, leverage your L&D, team by making the leaders cascade then, what they just learned towards their teams, which I also found super, super powerful.
Yeah. In fact, thank you for reminding me on that, Moritz, because we spend a lot of time. They also get coaching throughout the whole process, so individual coaching and team coaching. And a lot of it actually starts with them in small groups in a room, getting vulnerable with one another. So going through their sort of river of life experiences that they've had, opening up about who they are, where they're at. They also get leadership assessments. So they have this information that the coach very carefully shares with them and works with them on so that they know who they are. We speak a lot about this inner game and outer game of leadership, that the inner game is who you are and who you want to be. And the outer game is what you do and what you get. So it's and we always start with that inner game piece because we know your inner game plays such an important role in terms of your outer game. So who you are and how you turn up in situations, whether you need to brainstorm, whether you need to deliver hard messages, whether you need to galvanize a team to execute. A lot of how well you do that depends on how well you're doing internally at that moment. If you're distracted, got too many things on the go and you're trying to motivate a team, it's really gonna go badly. So yeah, you're right that we spend a lot of time on that inner game, on that vulnerability, getting people to understand that self-awareness is critical to them being able to deliver well on their outer game.
And I think that fits also super well, I think, to the way you describe how the role of a leader is also changing, these days. I think you even called at one point the death of the kind of hero leader, who knows everything and who sits in this corner office. I think that's a model of the past or an image of the identity of a leader of the past, right?
Exactly right. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've all experienced that as well. We've all experienced these hero leaders, and which might have worked for a certain period of time in our evolution. But I think the world, and you see it again and again, the crises, the shifts that are happening around us are really taking their toll on leaders who try to be the hero leader and try to do everything. So one, it's not sustainable, I think is the first thing. We'd all love to be these hero leaders who can do everything, but really it's not sustainable in this world. And actually, you see it also in CEO churn. Lots of the average tenure now is 3 to 5 years. It was 10 plus years. It's now much shorter because they just can't handle the intensity of the role. So first of all, it's not sustainable to do it all on your own. So you need to leverage the team. You need to leverage others to be able to help you not only to cope, but also, to get the perspectives that you need to understand these situations. I often quote, and you can look it up, there's this bridge to nowhere. It's called the Choluteca Bridge that was built to withstand a hurricane. And it did withstand the hurricane, but unfortunately the river changed course. And I do think, probably if you ask those engineers building the bridge and all that, they would have been, these hero engineers. We're building this really tough bridge. But no one thought to ask, or there was no one on the team who said, what happens in a hurricane? Does the river change course and direction often? Yes, it does. Oh dear. Well, maybe how do we, adapt for that? So having that diversity of thought and people who can support you in thinking differently, thinking about constraints, thinking about unintended consequences, what ifs. We really need that as leaders nowadays. And the only way you're going to get that is if you yourself are vulnerable, because if you don't allow other ideas into the room or dissent and all of that, then you're going to struggle. Actually, Netflix, I learned recently, has a role which is sort of whatever, like their project lead role. But part of the job is to actively go and find dissent. And I just love that idea that that's part of their job, is to find the people who don't agree with what you're doing, understand that well, and then see, should you still be doing what you're doing, or does it shift your approach? I think more of us would do well to do that, but requires a lot of good inner game to be able to take on a lot of dissent and appreciate it, and then see what to do with it without being too attached to your own solution.
I love that. I think we coined that also in one of our programs as convenient confusion versus critical conversation, right? And that your job is to detect this convenient confusion, which is, of course, increasing in times of, business uncertainty, in times of matrix organizations. So it's all natural, right? To just, hide a little bit and avoid the conflict, which is, of course, deep down coming from our evolution, I feel. So, and then, to train us also to get better into those critical conversations. And I mean, I could go the whole hour on that one, but I think we have to move on, because there's so much more to dive into. And I mean, now that we've been talking a lot about, the management of, obviously, because there's a huge lever and it's, it's a certain leverage, right? You have to the organization if you really get leaders, to change role model, a new type of working and so on. But there's, of course, many more people working at Heineken. And let's go to the completely other side of the medal here, which is, I think, thousands of people who are really working on the bottling machines and who are brewing, the beer. And how do you design for them learning in a more impactful way, given, all the possibilities that we have today?
Yeah. So interestingly, with that group, often the misconception is that it's just a very physical role and not much knowledge work required. But actually, when you look at breweries nowadays, they are some of the most sophisticated, automated, computer-run environments that we have in our business. I mean, we've got, in some of our breweries, we've got some of those robot dogs actually walking around and checking on fill levels and bottles and all this kind of thing. So it's actually
making sure that the human doesn't interrupt the process.
Yeah. Well, and actually, the key thing that they're trying to do is reduce the manual labor and the roles that are very time consuming but not very value adding to the humans. That's how we're bringing in
Yeah. Yeah.
automation as much, especially the physical labor stuff. How can we reduce that so that humans can focus on the stuff that they're better at, which is the collaboration, the problem solving, that kind of thing. So a couple of so one is, first of all, it's actually quite a sophisticated environment, so we can actually do a lot, which is online learning and development, and we work a lot with our suppliers, especially with all the machinery and parts that we're bringing in, that we run a lot of education sessions, how to optimize this, how to do that differently. So there's a lot of hands-on good work there. There's obviously these digital twins, as we call them, that most manufacturing companies are doing, where you create a digital twin of your manufacturing environment and get people to train in simulations in that digital twin. So where everything is shown. So again, a lot of simulation is used there. And then, like I mentioned, a lot of it comes down to, we have great operators who've been running these breweries and bottling plants and processes for years. And one of the big things that we're trying to do is actually stimulate them sharing ideas with one another. And it was lovely. I was in a session recently where the guys were, they were sharing photos on their phones and videos of how they've solved vexing problems that other sites hadn't been able to figure out yet. And it's just through those simple mechanisms as well that often you can solve a whole bunch of things that people can learn from one another. So more and more, we're trying to make sure that different breweries become kind of innovation nodes, if you like, or places where we know this one is really good at this. So how do we expand that across the network and help our operators get that information when they need it and how they need it, which is often, again, coming back to the resources part, it's more the checklists, it's toolkits, it's videos, it's that kind of thing. It's just what they need because they want to learn the stuff they needed. So how do we give it to them at the time of need? And AI also increasingly is helping us with that. We've got some very cool AI engines that are helping run that for us and sharing that knowledge more effectively.
Yeah, I mean, talking of AI, I think that was also something, I guess, that you also were really pioneering, also already starting at Unilever, right? When it comes to the work you did there on flex experience and you work, right? I think you were one of the first, starting this whole concept and idea of a talent marketplace and maybe a skill-driven organization. And I guess that's also something you maybe also took, to Heineken. So how did that go? And I was wondering, what did you maybe do different, when you now basically had all this experience from Unilever, implementing this now a second time?
Great. So, I'm a big advocate of it, the talent marketplace, having come from Unilever and seen what's possible. At Unilever, we really focused initially, at least, on the gig work and the project work. And we were then moving
huge
on.
efficiency gains, right? You created from back also with you work this gig model. Exactly. I read this case. It's 3-4 years already, and I was amazed. This was big.
Yeah, and the motivation actually is the other thing. So people were super motivated to do projects in other areas because they knew they could learn new skills, or it might help them get a job in that area. Coming back to the motivation part behind learning and linking to careers, actually the whole talent marketplace is a huge enabler of that. When people know that investing time in learning these new skills and all that might help me get another job, they will do it. So coming into Heineken, what I found, I was trying to look for what would be the hook or the right angle to bring this kind of idea into Heineken. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time on at Heineken is succession planning, lots of talent committees and putting names in boxes and all this kind of thing. But the outcomes, we still find, when we need to get someone for a role, they're still not the right person for the role. So the outcomes or the return on investment from all this effort that's poured in there is not what we need. So the kind of angle I said to Heineken was, well, what if we made succession planning redundant? So that's the constraint. What if we stopped doing succession planning? What could we do in its place? And that's when we sort of gave birth to the idea within Heineken, at least, of the talent marketplace. Let's start challenging ourselves to leapfrog this whole succession planning process and use AI to match people to jobs Like, let's not just do gigs and projects. Let's go all the way to jobs. If it can match me to a car and match me to a nice B&B to stay, why can't it match me to a job? I guess was the question. So that's the mission that we're on. We haven't got there yet with Heineken, because one of the things I've learned is, the data that you have about your people and about the roles is critical to do this matching really well. So we need common skills taxonomies. We need common reference points around people's profiles. And then we need that in the job descriptions and that side of things as well. So we're working hard on that. But the mission is, let's stop doing succession planning and go all in on the talent marketplace. And I believe that, and again, coming from the experience we had at Unilever, it's going to unearth people that we never knew about. Because one of the things you'll probably recognize is that often with succession planning, we think of people based on their last role, maybe the last two roles if we're lucky. But like about my LinkedIn profile, I spent this time as a financial accountant, I spent time in sales and marketing, all this kind of thing. That stuff would never appear. No one would ever think about that when they're considering me for another role. However, that business experience that I've had has been hugely valuable in informing how I work now. And I believe if we use the AI correctly, it can really look at someone's full profile of experiences and skills that they have and translate that into other roles that they could do that they've probably never even thought of. When we did this at Unilever on a small pilot scale, we took procurement people and we said, what about careers in sales? And when we positioned this to them, they had no idea that they had this is a procurement side. They didn't realize that 70% of their skills were a good match with sales, because they've just been on the other side of the table as the buyer doing the negotiation. But they could equally do a great job in the sales team. And when we told them this, they were like, wow, I never realized that I could be someone in that role. Yeah, that might be quite cool to try out. So I think it has huge potential to unlock talent mobility much more than we've ever been able to with our kind of bog standard succession planning process.
Yeah, I really loved also this kind of, I think you called it the SPEL framework: skills, performance, experience, leadership, and learning agility, which I found super strong to say, well, this should be a key indicator, right, for a person to move
That's how you should think about people as well.
Heineken. Yeah.
And it's not just skills, because this is the thing. Everyone gets hung up on the skills-based organization thing, but it's skills, it's potential, it's experience, and the leadership. We need to look at all those four elements around people. And that's actually where we've actively been trying to collect good data about people so that we can take a much more holistic view of them when considering them for roles.
Taking a holistic view, I think, is a good one to now zoom a little bit out, because what I found really striking when I was getting into your case was that basically you established 4 unshakable talent beliefs. That's how you called them, which I really like, because I'm a strong believer in this idea of principle thinking, right? And taking a step back and yeah. When did this come up, and is that somehow the kind of link between the strategy and your work in the people department? Yeah, maybe you can say a couple of words on that, because I found this very new.
Yeah. I think exactly as you said, you need principles, and in the learning space, I keep coming back to those principles of how people learn. We need to use that. So the same thing on talent. When I was looking here, and actually, to be fair, those talent beliefs came slightly before my time here, but I really like them because they are good beliefs and principles. But they were put in place just as we do on learning to help guide how we do talent here. And let me just take one example from that. The one talent belief, probably one of the most important, is to take bets on talent. It's the most important because so often people just hold on to their talent. They're not wanting to let them go, or they don't feel someone's good enough to take on the role, and they always want more evidence and all this kind of thing. So we take that principle or that belief, but then we say, how do we make this a reality? If we believe this is important, how do we make it a reality? So one of the ways we make it a reality is we say, if you say, oh, someone's not ready enough in one of the talent reviews, you have to produce a 3-page document that explains why they're not ready enough. If you say they're ready, you don't have to do anything else. So what we're trying to err on is the idea that, yeah, let's rather take the bet on someone. And if you don't want to take a bet on them, the burden of kind of proof sits on you. You need to put in all the evidence why they're not ready. You need to go and spend all that time doing that. But that's how we try and turn a principle or a belief into a reality. So always believe you need good principles to start your thinking, but then you also need, some mechanism to bring that into reality.
Yeah, I think that's also a super strong example for, I think, something you call the productive dualities, right? That leaders have to somehow navigate. And I've found it
Yeah.
super strong, especially in days like these, where I think this whole topic of performance culture, is trending. That you have a very clear position on that as well, right? Saying that in the end you do not believe necessarily in those toxic, high pressure, fear based environments, but rather the opposite. So and you ground this in science, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, I don't know how much time we have, but I've always been impressed by this idea of the trust equation. So that trust is built through credibility. So do you know your stuff? Reliability. Do you deliver on time? And the third most important one is vulnerability. And often we forget about the vulnerability part. We focus on being credible and reliable often. And this comes down to also with performance. We want to be credible and know our stuff and reliable and deliver on time. But we forget that actually the third thing that builds trust is vulnerability. And what destroys it, so when you think of a trust equation, what's the denominator is self-interest. When people detect that you're only doing something for yourself, that really destroys trust. And so when we're trying to build, this kind of high performance culture, we're very much focusing on don't just be credible and reliable, but also be vulnerable. If you need to ask for help or ask for advice, that's super important to do that, because that creates an environment of psych safety that then allows high performance to flourish. Because again, like as you've seen from Amy Edmondson, it's not the teams that have the least mistakes that are the most high performing. It's the ones that talk about their mistakes the most that are the most high performing. So we try to bring that into, take out that toxicity of the environment. With that, if you only focus on credibility and reliability, often that's where the toxicity comes in.
It hurts me saying that we're slowly getting to the end of this podcast because, I mean, it feels for me like we just got started and there's so much more I would love to talk about. But here's the last topic I want to hear your thoughts on, because as you said, many companies are in this challenging phase right now of transformation. Some call it crisis, some call it turnaround. And I think what a talent people function can, also add to this is a way forward, right? A vision, a purpose, something that helps people to have this North Star and push forward. And I think this is also some incredible work, I think maybe of yours and the whole kind of strategy team involved to also give Heineken, I think 150 years. How old is Heineken?
Yeah, it's nearly 160 now.
Yeah. A company with such a history to give it this new purpose and this new vision, to strive for and to find also orientation at. And I want to stop here because I think you can talk way better than I about it. So yeah, give us an idea, how does, purpose, which I felt was also a topic that, for some folks have been all down the river now, have been, your force, your future force.
I'm a huge believer in the power of purpose. And this was ignited for me in my time at Unilever. You mentioned that you've spoken to Paul Polman before, and he was the real catalyst of that in Unilever. But he gave the organization a very clear purpose to make sustainable living commonplace. It was really inspiring, galvanized the organization. But what he also did very cleverly is help people discover their own individual purpose. Because what he realized is when people discover their own purpose and the power of purpose, that will actually make them even more motivated to drive the organization purpose forward. So he didn't require people to match their thinking with the organizational purpose. He was really into, discover your own purpose. And what I learned through that process as well was that when you discover your own sort of purpose, your own reason for being, your uniqueness, your strengths, it really helps guide you actually in your career choices and what you want to learn, roles you want to play. So we used to at Unilever help people come up with their own tagline around their purpose and then use that actually as part of their personal development plan. We changed it to a purpose-driven development plan that then helped guide you in terms of your career choices, next roles, what you wanted to learn and develop. That would then help you ignite, your uniqueness. So for me, I had a purpose statement which was around kind of bringing joy and optimism into the room because that's what I love doing. I'm a bit more like on the Ted Lasso, Pollyanna side of stuff. And that helped guide me to say, hey, you need to be in learning and development roles and roles where you can inspire, motivate, innovate with people. So that really helped guide my career and gave me the confidence to go and challenge my bosses at Unilever at the time, to do this. It's one of the reasons I made the move to Heineken because I was really inspired by Heineken's purpose, which is to brew the joy of true togetherness. And I thought in a world that we find ourselves in the moment with a lot of polarization happening and a lot of loneliness, that this is a purpose that I want to be a part of. And by the way, if you let me talk about loneliness just for a moment,
Sure.
it's something Heineken finds really important that we're here to combat is this loneliness epidemic. And that's literally how it's been described by the US Surgeon General under the Biden era. He described it as that. He described it as the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day is
Wow.
the health consequences of loneliness. And 1 in 4 people in a Gallup survey have reported to feeling somewhat to very lonely. So that's a quarter of the population. And I do think L&D teams beyond Heineken should be thinking about how do you also make sure that your workplace is a culture of connection, a culture where people feel a sense of belonging because people spend lots of time at work. So let's make sure that the work environment is a great place to be and to connect and to socialize and not just a place where you sit behind a screen all day. So that would be my one shout out to the L&D community. Let's really be intentional about bringing people together because, learning, developing, growing, it's a team sport at the end of the day. And we all want that belonging when we're in
Wow.
the workplace.
We come to the last question, and Good Morning L&D is the wake up call for people who want to design this future of learning and development and talent. And if I just look at our conversation, what I said at the beginning holds true. You are a pioneer. You inspire people, right, to think differently about learning, development, talent, culture, leadership. I mean, wow. What is your kind of I, don't know, I was close to say Coca-Cola formula, but maybe your Heineken formula, right?
It's very
So
well.
so what gets you, what makes you this pioneer, and what helps you to navigate also in this time and keep on going, right, and keep on pushing and keep on innovating.
Yeah, I guess I've always been inspired by that Charles Darwin quote that says it's not the most intelligent species that survive, nor the strongest. It's the ones that are most adaptable to change. And I think that definitely drives me in terms of thinking how do we continuously innovate so that we are adapting to changes and what we see around us and pioneering, actually being ahead of the curve is really what inspires me. How do we make sure that we stay ahead? I'm always excited when we've designed something or innovated something that I go, no one else has got this yet. Let's go for this. So I guess, that's a little bit of my mantra that keeps me going.
It definitely does. I mean, Paddy, thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, I learned so much. I'm really inspired. I mean, you said it, that your purpose is to bring joy and optimism in the room. So I leave this podcast with a lot of optimism for, learning, for talent, for leadership, for culture topics, that they can, be the force for a company in times of transformation, in times of change, uh, even more. So thank you so much for making the time. For everyone who's listening in, yeah, as always, share your feedback. Let us know what you think about the episode. Subscribe to listen, to more of people like Paddy. Those who are really doing it, who are pioneering and shaking up the future of learning, development, and talent. So yeah, I'm super excited. Thank you so much, Paddy.
No worries, Morris. And thank you for the great questions and the great preparation, by the way. You did a super job on that.
Yeah, and still feel like I just maybe half of it. I came through half of it. So yeah, there might be a continuation at one point, part two. I hope for.
Yeah, who knows? Cool.
Thank you very much.